Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to yet another edition of the Lambom Show. Today is Wednesday, June 8th, 2022. And I want to start off by apologizing that we are starting off late. There was a technical problem. We are glad that we're able to fix it. And so today we are going to be handling something on immigration. I'm glad to have the expert on immigration here. When we talk about lawyers, there are lawyers and there are lawyers. This is the second time Danielle is coming on this show. I had asked, you know, I'm very happy that she's able to make the time because she's always very busy between courts and lectures, conferences. But Danielle is not a stranger to immigrants in the United States, people seeking asylum or seeking to rectify their status at different levels. She has worked with many Africans from different African countries, but particularly Cameroonians. I think the last African country she visited should be Cameroon, if I'm not mistaken. Um, we are handling something that happened recently. Temporary protected status was granted to citizens from Cameroon of Cameroonian descent. And I think Monday, the applications were supposed to start going on the 7th, that yesterday. And I know there's some confusion. Many people are anxious. They don't know what is happening, what's the difference. But we have the expert right here with us. So Danielle, good evening and welcome. Thank you for the time. It's great to be with you again. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Lambert. It's my pleasure to be on here. And this is brand new news. So what I thought I would do is tell you a little bit about what TPS does do and what it doesn't do, because there's a lot of confusion about what it is and what it does, and if you should apply or you shouldn't apply. There's a lot of new things going on. I've been doing this for about 30 years, so I do a lot of cases at the courts. Basically, what I wanted to preface my statements by is that a lot of I have probably at this point about 95 countries I've represented. Cameroonians, I definitely have a whole lot of them in my portfolio. Cameroonians basically tend to do certain kinds of cases, which is asylum, some family, not a huge amount of employment based. So, it as I said, certainly my entire population is not Cameroonian, but sometimes people think it is because those are the people who come into our office a lot. So TPS is something that Cameroonians have been advocating for a long time. For about the last year, I've been getting emails from people saying, yes, isn't Cameroon going to have TPS? Aren't we now free and safe and getting green cards? And I would say no, TPS hasn't been announced yet. It hasn't happened. And then about April 15, Biden's administration announced that they would, in fact, grant TPS to Cameroonians, which was quite surprising in many ways because Cameroonians had been advocating it for a long time. BIA is not new to Cameroon by any means. So the situation has been bad for a long time. And lately, largely because the separatists and the problems with the separatists and Cameroonian SCNC and other groups, it's gotten worse. The armed conflict villages have been destroyed and all that. So first of all, let me say that TPS is not asylum. It is not even significant to get asylum just because you have TPS. So the two are not equivalent. TPS is something that about 10 countries currently have. This year was a very active year. First of all, Sudan got it. And then South Sudan was redesignated, then Afghanistan and Ukraine. And then lastly, for the very first time ever, Cameroon. So that's kind of been the thing. So there's a lot of people pushing for TPS for a lot of different countries. For example, Ethiopia has been pushing for it for a long time. Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua. Not many African countries have it. It's pretty rare. In fact, Sierra Leone had it for quite a period of time during the war, but then they lost it. So TPS is something you can get. It has to be redesignated. So it's given as of people who have continuous presence as of April 14 of this year. That means you have to have continuous residency. So there's two requirements. One is continuous residency. The other one is continuous presence. So they're a little bit different. We're not sure exactly how they're going to be interpreted. The continuous residency is from April 15. The continuous presence is from June 7 of this year. So if you haven't entered,
Danielle,
go ahead.
Yeah, just before I just want to stop because that's a kind of confusing. What is the difference between continuous presence and continuous residency? Because I also saw that it said people before, if you have been in this country up till April 15th, then you are good. But then there's something again about June 7th. What is that difference, that time lapse, and how is that important?
So continuous residency means you have to have been actually living in the U.S. since April 14. So if you just entered between April and June, I'm assuming that means that you're not going to be eligible because you would only have the physical presence. That's number one. Number two, physical presence would mean physically present in the U.S. So the question is, and we are not quite sure yet, but we will find out shortly, does that mean that if you're present and you have physical and residency since April 14, 2022, and you have physical presence, that means supposing you were here April 14, but then you left the country and you're still outside the country and you didn't come back before June 7. I assume that means you're not going to be eligible because you weren't physically present in the U.S. on June 7th. So it means that you might think very seriously about leaving the country right now if you're thinking about applying for TPS, because physical presence means physically present in the U.S. It doesn't mean that you have been living here and you're here. It means physically present. So being here physically, not being gone to Cameroon or being gone to Europe or wherever it is you're going to travel, because that's going to take away from your physical presence. So I think that's the difference. So so let me talk a little bit about an interesting experience. So I'm involved with Nova, a women's group, and Nova Alexandria, one of the professors is Dr. Jill Biden. So I went to this event about a month ago. It was in May. And of course, you know, it's a small group of people who know each other. So I was able to talk to her and I said, you know, thank you so much for your husband finally declaring TPS and all that. And, you know, I expressed that my gratitude for them doing that. And she agreed. So that was just kind of a little interesting side story on this whole thing. So what happened was when they announced TPS in April, what we saw and what we're seeing now is different in the courts. So what we saw initially was the government who was prosecuting these cases said, you know what, there's too many cases, even though there's new courts, new judges, there's new courts in Annandale, Hyattsville, Richmond. So there's all these new judges who've been elected. And there's like so many new judges in this area, probably at least 30 that are coming in. So they're moving these cases to Hyattsville from Baltimore and all that. And so the government was saying, you know, TPS has been declared for Cameroonians, so we'll dismiss your case. And they would say, do you want to consider and discuss dismissing your case? And a lot of lawyers would say, sure, let's dismiss the case, get the person out of removal proceedings so they can do something else. Well, that sounds like a great idea in theory, but in practice, what I had was people who had been waiting for asylum hearings for years. And by agreeing to dismiss the case, some of those people then would have absolutely no option to ever get a green card because, one, they entered across the border illegally. So even if you marry an American, you're not going to be able to necessarily get a green card based on that marriage. Two, they had been waiting so long for the green card and for the asylum hearing, and they maybe had a good case, because I think all my cases are great, of course, that by dismissing their case, they would start back from scratch and they wouldn't be able to apply for asylum again because they've been here maybe 6 years or 7 years or 8 years. You know, maybe their case got sent back and remanded from the board. So they were going to be in a very difficult situation of having TPS, yes, for 18 months, which would give them a work permit, which they already had, most of them, and they would have nothing. So my response to the government was, no, I don't want it. My client will apply for TPS if they want, but that will be additional, and I'm going forward on the asylum because we believe that we have a good case. So now, go ahead.
Danielle, I wanted to highlight that because that's an important factor for people, especially those who are on asylum, to take note. If you have applied for asylum and your case is pending, there is no harm. I mean, I'm going to ask that later on. No harm in applying for TPS. No. But if your case has come up and they're asking you, hey, do you mind dismissing the case? Do not agree to dismiss the case just because you want an easy thing. They are saying dismiss it because you have TPS. TPS gives you a temporary condition. You don't have all 9 yards. If you had gone through the case and succeeded with the asylum, there's a possibility of now getting your green card and eventually becoming a citizen. But if you say yes and the case is dismissed, then it forecloses all other options that you would have had. I think that's what I'm
exactly hearing. Correct. So that's exactly right, Lambert. So TPS, first of all, gives you a work permit. That's one thing. Two, it protects you from the government being able to pick you up, put you in jail, or deport you. That's very important because now if you commit a crime, that's different, obviously. But that's very important because being granted withholding or asylum, that also gives you a work permit, and it also gives you many other things like a ability to bring in your kids, ability to bring in your wife. TPS doesn't do that. It doesn't say, okay, you know, I get a lot of questions. People say, oh, no, TPS has been granted. Can't I bring over my relatives? Doesn't that make it a lot easier for me to bring over my relatives? And the answer is no, absolutely not. It has nothing to do with your relatives who are back home. It's only to do with people here. Another question I get is people say, oh, now that TPS has been announced, can't you use that to expedite my case for my marriage or my other thing? And I'm like, no, it has nothing to do with expediting your case. TPS is something all by itself. It has nothing to do with the asylum per se, okay? You can have both. So they are different. And let me explain who should apply for TPS and who shouldn't, and why TPS might be important for you to have or not. So first of all, TPS is saying you have armed conflict in your country. You have environmental disaster. You have other extraordinary problems. It is not saying you would be persecuted if you return home. It is not saying you would be granted asylum because of TPS. That's not at all what it says. So you need to differentiate between that. Because I've seen some attorneys trying to say, well, TPS, if I have TPS, that means that Anglophones are recognized as a protected group and Anglophones therefore are persecuted if they go back home. That's not what TPS says. It's clearly, if you read the report that's about 30 pages long, that's not at all what the report says, why they granted TPS. Okay, so don't make that mistake. Secondly, it's about the conflict. So the whole thing at TPS was granted because of the conflict between Cameroon and the separatists. Now, according to the UK office I looked up, it says that separatists and government forces have killed over 3,000 people, forced over 900,000 people from their homes, and kept about 100,000 children out of school since 2017. So I think we all recognize that since 2017, things, at least for Anglophones in the Northwest, Southwest, have gotten much worse. Maybe not necessarily if you're from Douala or Yaoundé or Littoral. I mean, none of those areas necessarily, if you're a UDPS or you're MRC or you're one of those groups, I mean, TPS still applies completely, but it doesn't have to do with that problem. So the report says basically people in the Anglophone areas need humanitarian aid. They need assistance with education, food, healthcare, shelter, water, and sanitation. Therefore, if they're here, you know, let's give them TPS. So that's kind of the theory. So in addition to that, in Cameroon, you had another factor that really helped, and that's the Boko Haram, because in the north, Boko Haram were killing people, and therefore they were saying all these government security forces are committing violations. These terrorist groups are committing violations. They're raiding villages, burning homes. In addition, there's economic detriment. So there's COVID problems. There's also problems with food. There's, even though Cameroon is basically the breadbasket, there is some problems with that. And therefore, they're saying if people got deported, they would be in danger if they go back. So when do you want to apply for TPS and when do you not want to apply for TPS? So I think certain categories of people definitely should apply for TPS. And I would say those people are people who have gone through the system and been denied by an immigration judge, or been denied by the Board of Immigration Appeals, or been denied by a circuit court, or been denied by a U.S. District Court. I think those people, it's a no-brainer. If they don't apply, they're just plain stupid, because that protects them from being picked up and being deported. So I think that's highly important.
So Danielle, let's, on that point, the people for whom TPS is very important, absolutely important, is anybody who has gone through the immigration system. So you have gone through the district court, circuit court, BIA, and you're on deportation. This is a no-brainer. Go for it.
Right.
So,
now, so then there's some ifs, right? So what if you're in court and you have a case for asylum, but you haven't yet been heard by the judge, but maybe you came across the border and you have some problems that your case isn't going to be heard right away? I think those people definitely should apply. What if you're applying for asylum in court? Well, unless you have a really great attorney, I definitely apply for TPS, because the chances of Cameroonian, I mean, I looked up the statistics. Cameroonians are about 85% of Cameroonians were being rejected. Now, I was shocked when I read that, because I was like, you know, 99% of mine are being granted. So how is that happening? But we put a lot of work and effort into our cases, and we're sort of known all over the country as kind of experts in asylum in general, and, you know, Cameroon to a certain degree also, along with some other African countries. So if you're in court proceedings, I would, you know, you can talk to me and say, is it good for me to do it or not? And I would say, look, it doesn't hurt you. I mean, it costs you a little bit of money. And I'm going to talk about how much does it cost you to file for TPS. Basically, there's a fee. We charge like $1,500, and then you have a filing fee of about $135. And then you have also the work permit fee, which is $410. So you've got a couple fees, but, you know, that's not a lot of money, and it's protection. Now, remember, it's only protection for 18 months, but realistically, in 18 months, do you think that BIA is going to be gone, or whoever's going to take over for BIA? Probably not. Do you think that the separatist problem is going to go away? Probably not. So I would say there's a strong likelihood that it'll be redesignated and you'll have to reapply. I mean, some countries like El Salvador have had it since 1991, for God's sake, and they keep getting renewed. Now, a lot of that's political, but still, you have to consider that maybe it's not going to go away. Now, here's the key to TPS. TPS, you only have a window to file. If you miss that window, you can't go back and say, oh, now I've been deported. Now I want to apply. So that's the problem, because that window starts on to June 7th, which is yesterday, and it goes through December 7th, 2023 is what I read. But I was wondering if they made a mistake, because usually they give 6 months, and that seems like a 1.5 year window to apply, which I don't think is correct. I think they meant June 7, 2022. But if I were applying for asylum, I would definitely apply before December of this year, because once you're in the system, if they redesignate, you have to re-register. You can't just say, oh, I'm in. I don't have to do anything anymore. So you do have to re-register, and you do have to, after the 18 months, you do have to do that. So it's not just once I'm in forever.
So Danielle, just a little bit, sorry to interrupt you, but let's take that one step back.
Okay.
There are different categories of people in asylum proceedings. There are those who came in normally, have their passports, and they have all that, so they are filing for asylum normally, affirmative asylum, isn't it? That's great. There are those who came in through Mexico or through, and they don't have any documents. They don't have any of that. They have lost all of that, because I think one of the conditions is you have to prove citizenship, isn't it? You have to prove that you're a citizen of Cameroon. Okay.
Yeah. So I haven't even gotten to those requirements. So I mean, talking about the requirements, yes, you have to prove that you're a national of Cameroon or a non-citizen without nationality who last resided habitually in Cameroon. Well, good luck with that one. I think that one's going to be very difficult. And I think they're going to pretty much wipe that one out. So I think, first of all, you have to have a passport. You have to have a Cameroonian ID. You have to have a birth certificate. I mean, maybe you weren't born in Cameroon. That doesn't matter if you have nationality that's Cameroonian. But let's talk about those categories, because affirmative, say you have been pending, and some people have been pending, waiting for asylum affirmatively since 2014 and 15. So should those people apply for TPS? They have a work permit, so they're saying, why should I apply? I'm waiting for my court date. I'm waiting for my interview date. And I haven't even been denied yet. So why should I apply for TPS? Well, there are several reasons. TPS, interestingly enough, which doesn't really help asylees, but it can sometimes give you work permit. So I have done work permits for other nationalities for TPS. The problem is, if you're an asylum applicant and you're asking for a work permit to go back to Cameroon, that's never going to be granted. And if you did, you would lose your asylum and you would be subject to a 10-year bar. So that's very important to remember. So you do not want to get a work permit if you're on the asylum track with TPS.
Can you clarify that, Danielle?
Okay, so TPS can sometimes give you a work permit. It always gives you a work permit if you apply. It also can possibly give you permission to travel, but it requires a separate application other than the TPS to get approved before you can travel. People who have, now I don't want to get into too much complication here, because there's an issue about unlawful presence. So this whole issue came out and was litigated with people from El Salvador and Nicaragua who had traveled. And the reason they had traveled is because they entered originally illegally, like across the border, iwi. And so they were trying to go out and come back in so they would have a status. And then all this litigation pursued and came out of that saying, maybe TPS shouldn't give a travel document. So TPS in theory, can give you a travel document, but not if you're an asylum applicant. It will never give you a travel document to go back to your home country, to Cameroon, ever. Okay, does that clarify it?
Yes, absolutely. And I really wanted to focus on a little bit on that point, because I know of people who have come here and gotten asylum, then something happened and they traveled back to bury their parents, and on coming back they could not, because you have now gone back to the country from which you're fleeing. And so people are wondering, but I got this, and I say, oh, sorry, you were not supposed to. So again, and so TPS is able to grant you a travel document. I mean,
some people, not
yes,
for everybody, but it'll grant some people.
Some people.
Let
so
me
the
give you a funny
advice
story example. So I had 2 clients, and this happened this year, which it really kind of shocked me. I had 2 clients who were on affirmative asylum. They'd been on affirmative asylum for years, and both of them decided they wanted to go on a cruise ship. So they went on a cruise ship, and they thought, I'm going to U.S. Virgin Islands. So they went to U.S. Virgin Islands. They came back and they got off the cruise. When they came back to get off the cruise ship, they wouldn't let them into the U.S. and they put them in deportation, and they had to reapply for asylum. And they were lucky, because we had to work hard with them, because frankly, once you leave if you have affirmative asylum or you have deportation removal asylum and you've applied and you leave the country, you automatically abandon your asylum application. So it's gone. So you have to reapply. So what happens if you reapply? Well, then you've got all kinds of problems. Well, why were you going out on vacation? If you're a refugee, and you have to reapply, restart all over again. And you're in deportation. That's the other thing. So you're not just going affirmatively. So maybe that's a good thing, because maybe your case will be heard faster, but usually it's not always a good thing. And by the way, U.S. Virgin Islands is not part of the U.S. Okay. So I don't know where they got that they thought it was, but it's not. So let's talk a little bit about what Lambert mentioned. So we do a lot of naturalization problem cases, and I had one woman once. She had gone back to her country at least 5 times when she had a green card. So when she went to her naturalization, they denied it, of course, and they said, you need a lawyer. So so I said, well, let's go through each travel. Why did you go back? Okay, so and there are very limited circumstances you can go back, but it's tricky. It's very tricky, because say you wanted to go bury your father, and you say, well, I had the Cameroonian government didn't know I was there. I was in high. Okay, that's kind of hard to prove, and they may agree to that or they may not. We do use a legal theory, which has worked for these people, some of them, but basically you don't want to go back to your country till you become a U.S. citizen. And if you're applying for asylum and you come and tell me, well, when can I go back to my country? I'm not going to be very impressed, because I'm going to say, well, are you a refugee, or are you claiming asylum, or are you just faking it? So that's one thing to consider. The other thing to consider is the fact that you really do abandon your asylum affirmative if you leave the country, and you abandon if you are in deportation and you leave, you self-deport. In other words, you have deported yourself, and you are not coming back for 10 years. So I think that's very important to remember. The other thing to remember is that the government is not stupid. So I have about 10 cases right now of people who have granted asylum maybe 15 years ago. And then they applied for their green card, and their green cards got stuck forever. Or maybe they got the green cards and they applied for citizenship. And what happens is they discover that person went back home, and it comes up a lot in citizenship, by the way. And they say, well, did you go back to your home country? And I had a client, I said, tell the truth. And she said, no, I never went back to my country. And I said, obviously you're not telling the truth when we got out, because the officer said to her, we have proof you went back to Cameroon. And so I said, did you ever buy a ticket here in the US to travel to Cameroon? She said, oh yeah. I'm like, do you think that they don't check where you buy the ticket? And if you fly from here to Yaoundé, they don't know? Of course they know, you know. So people are not always very clever about things they do and shouldn't be doing to start with, you know. So let's talk about people who are not eligible for TPS. So people who are affirmative, as I said, that's a question of, if you're affirmative or you're married to a U.S. citizen, I would say talk to your lawyer, talk to me, because there's some situations I'd say, yes, apply for TPS. And there's some situations I might say no. But I mean, honestly, having TPS doesn't hurt you for any other case. So there's no negative really to applying for it. It's a protection and it doesn't hurt any of your other cases. So there's no, if you have the money and the ability to do it, maybe you want to do it anyway, because, you know, sometimes marriages go bad or sometimes something else goes bad and then you can't get a work permit and then you're stuck. And then, you know, whereas the TPS, you're going to get that work permit. So that's one thing. So you can't apply for TPS if you've been convicted of a felony or of 2 misdemeanors. So if you have a felony or 2 misdemeanors, you're not eligible to apply for TPS. You cannot apply for TPS if you're inadmissible under criminal or security related grounds that are not waivable. Okay, so that's kind of complicated and I'm not going to go into great detail about it. That's something you need to kind of check with your attorney, you know, if you fit into that category. If you're subject to a mandatory bar for asylum. So for example, they say you assisted a persecutor, say you're a police officer and you asked for asylum and they said, well, you assisted by being involved with the police, or you engaged in some kind of terrorist activity or some kind of fraud issue, you're not going to be eligible for TPS. So let's go over the things that it does. So 1, TPS, did I say it affected? This is a true or false. Does TPS affect your asylum application or benefits?
No.
No. Does the denial of an application for asylum or any other immigration benefit affect your ability to apply for TPS?
No.
No.
Well,
So see, I know Lambert was listening. So hopefully the rest of you got that right, that little pop quiz right too. So I think that, you know, I wanted to talk about a change that happened this week because it's the immigration lawyers are all talking about it. So people were in court and applied for asylum. And, you know, I just had a case of a guy who's married to a U.S. citizen. We had an I-130 approved for him. He has 3 U.S. citizen children. And he said, I have my I-130 approved. You got it. Let's just go forward on that. I said, you can't, because you came in across the border. You were paroled across the border for asylum. You are not eligible to adjust. So why apply for the I-130, he said. And what do you think the answer is?
why apply for?
Why did I apply for the I-130 based on my wife? Why did I do that?
To buy some time.
Well, maybe, but my main reason is because the judges are less likely, are going to see more favorably somebody, and he had a very horrible case. So they're going to look much more favorably on someone who's married to a U.S. citizen, has a petition approved, and U.S. citizen kids, if their case is iffy, than someone who doesn't have that. So that was my reasoning. In fact, I had Judge Kolsch one time tell me, look, I wouldn't grant this case, but he's got a U.S. citizen wife, and I don't necessarily believe everything he says, but, you know, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, he said to the client. So he didn't like the client because the client didn't answer in a way that he liked. He hesitated too much when he answered.
So here's a question for you, Danielle, before you go on. Can TPS lead to a green card?
No, absolutely not, ever. So don't say, okay, I'm going to do TPS or asylum. It's not, it doesn't work that way. So TPS does not lead to a green card. Now, the other thing is people say, well, you know, I want to save the money. I'll just do it myself. TPS is a complicated form. There is complicated requirements, just, you know, so you don't really want to do it yourself. It's not a lot of money. Because if you do it yourself and you come to me and you say, I haven't gotten anything, it's been like 6 months or a year, can you help me? I'm going to say, I didn't file it, I can't fix it. So the advantage of having a lawyer is that they have tracked everything, and therefore if there's a problem, they're going to fix it, you know. So that's kind of the whole thing about this. So I mean, there's many with the cases. By the way, I still wanted to mention one thing, is that now the government is filing automatic cases to dismiss Cameroonian cases, which they're filing without even talking to us or asking us. So they're saying, I just got an email today saying from a government attorney, I filed a motion to dismiss on your case because he's Cameroonian, he's eligible for TPS. And I said, no, I'm probably going to oppose this motion, but I've heard from my colleagues that judges are granting these motions without giving the attorney even time to respond and oppose it. For most people, that's probably not a good thing, as I said. So, you know, that's one thing to keep in mind. And we're taking that to national Avela because we don't agree with that. The government shouldn't just be able to get rid of our case just because they, you know, someone's going to get something for 18 months and maybe never be able to bring in their family, never be able to get a green card, never be able to do anything after that. So that's my theory. So it's been, I'm happy to answer any questions if people have questions.
Yes, there are a couple of them coming. Let me finish with mine before I get over to those who are asking. But again, I want to take this piecemeal. Cameroon has a good relationship with Nigeria, for example. There are a number of Nigerians who are living in Cameroon. And so if somebody leaves, a Nigerian who has been in Cameroon and is now in the US, in terms of claiming citizenship, the last country of where they stayed, and they no longer want to claim that they are Nigerians, is that a possibility?
Well, they're going to have to prove they're Cameroonians. So if they live in Nigeria, the question is, are they going to be able to prove that they are a national of Cameroon? So it doesn't say you have to have lived in Cameroon, but you have to either be a Cameroonian national or someone who has no nationality, which is very rare, who has resided continuously in Cameroon. So you could be a Cameroonian who has lived in Nigeria, technically. Now, I think that loophole will be covered. I think that, you know, with any TPS, they make a rule, but then as they see problems, they change it. So I think that that's something that is definitely a loophole. And I think that they will probably try to change that. Because if you're a Cameroonian, you've never lived in Cameroon, you've only lived in Nigeria, and then you claim TPS because you're a Cameroonian, that's not really the purpose of TPS. Yes. But right now, under the rules, that's permissible. So
Danielle, I wanted to clarify you. So you said currently anybody who wants to apply for TPS through your firm, the fee is $1,500, then $135 for the application, and $410 for the EAD, the employment authorization. Am I correct?
Correct.
So again, please,
and we just charge a flat fee, and we have a whole system worked out, which we worked out when it came out, you know, as to how this could be. Now, if you are getting a green card through your marriage, I'm going to tell you, you know, don't bother. There's no reason. You're going to get a green card. I mean, unless there's something wrong with the marriage or something, or he left and you're not really living. I'm going to say, don't bother. So I'm not going to look, I'm at the end of my career here. I'm not trying to make money off anybody. otherwise I wouldn't be doing this for free tonight when I'm leaving on a trip. So, I mean, you know, I'm just doing this to give you information to help you guys out. So we're not making money on TPS. We're just doing it as a service because we want it done right, because it could be so easily done wrong. And if you do something wrong in immigration, if there's one thing I've learned, it takes months and years sometimes to fix that. So it's not worth the little amount of money you may save, and then you have to hire someone to fix the problem.
So
and
I really
the deadline or whatever.
I really want to underscore that point, Danielle, because the danger with our community is there are too many other lawyers, isn't it? People who are claiming that they can do these things, then they do the mistakes before you start coming back to. It's not nice to be cheap. One, over the last year, since the Trump presidency, when immigration was not favorable to immigrants in terms of filing for asylum here and all that, it has become very important for you to look for a lawyer to help you through the immigration process, whatever is going to take for you. Okay, so my advice to people is always get the legal counsel that you need. Don't be penny wise and pound foolish, because it's going to end up costing you more. So get an attorney. If you have questions, and I'm glad I was able to get Danielle here. I appreciate it. She's supposed to be on traveling and she accepted. And again, just a couple of other things for us to go through. I see some two questions on my time here. One is the fact that if you have applied for asylum, affirmative asylum, if you have applied for affirmative asylum, you have not gone for any of the other things, does it hurt? So
no. I mean, the thing is, if you don't apply in that window, you can't say, you know, the saddest story I have is people who come to me and they say, you know what, I could have filed for asylum, but when I came here, I didn't. And now it's years later and they're 20 years and they have nothing and they can't do anything. And they could have applied for asylum and won. Or people who say, I missed my opportunity, or I have a huge practice. I do appellate work. So I do a lot of motions to reopen, circuit court appeals. I read these briefs. I just filed one today. I read these briefs and the denials, and I think, oh my gee, how is it possible that these cases that are way stronger than most of the cases I do lost? And the reason is two things. One, the lawyer didn't prepare them properly. Two, the lawyer didn't do any work to really check and submit good documents. We don't do those mistakes. So I'm known sort of around the community as the lawyer who fixes other lawyers' bad mistakes. Sometimes I can't fix them though, you know. So, you know, sometimes I'm amazed at how poor some of the work is that other lawyers do. It's like they just don't care, or they're just trying to make money. That's never been my philosophy. My philosophy, I was a teacher and professor before I was a lawyer. So my philosophy is much of an educational basis, you know, having people know and understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. And people know if they come to me, they're going to get a straight answer. If I don't think you should do it, I'm going to say, don't do it. Don't file. Don't waste your money. You know, so that's kind of my philosophy, you know.
So, Ina Abaka Sabone, can you do TPS and prosecutorial discretion? I don't know what, I mean.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. So, yes, the answer is yes, because if you've been deported, okay, so prosecutorial discretion is something very misunderstood. It's something that's existed for years, but now it's like everybody's using it as a keyword, like, you know, the magic word. So prosecutorial discretion is used in many, many different ways. One way it's used is you talk to the government, you say, look, can you agree to certain things? Another way, more commonly now, is that we file motions to request the government, which we always did for like 20 years. I've done this, but anyway, it's supposedly new. It's not new. You ask the government, you say, this is why you should agree to my case. Can you agree, even though this person was deported, can you agree that you should exercise your prosecutorial discretion to not prosecute, but to terminate this case so this person who has been here for years can now get a green card a different way, maybe through marriage or whatever. And so that's what prosecutorial discretion is. And we do a lot of that. And again, it's in various different forms depending on what level you're at. TPS certainly helps prosecutorial discretion. There's a connection, because if you're saying to the government, help me, I'm married to a US citizen, you know, I have a good case, I have this, but I got deported and I have TPS, they're going to say, you know what, I can't deport you anyway, so maybe I'll just agree. So will they? No, not necessarily, but certainly I think it can be helpful. And I had one case that was granted because of TPS, not from another country, but you know, I think it is helpful. If you're, again, it goes back to my original statement that Lambert and I were talking about, is if you're one of those people who needs prosecutorial discretion, you've already been denied. So you're a perfect candidate for TPS.
Great. Please, barrister, if I've applied for asylum after release from DHS custody from the borders, am I eligible to apply for TPS?
Yes.
Short answer. Okay, Etienne, you have your answer. Divine Chamukong says, great content. Of course, your best friend. Danielle, thanks for your expeditious and effusive handling of a cutting-edge issue like TPS. This will invariably equip my members of MORISC and the SCNC with relevant information. This intervention is a blanket saving on consultation fees, even though I highly recommend that our members pay their consultation fees to competent attorneys and be abreast of the requisite legal advice. Danielle, thanks for your service to our people. Your adroitness, competence, and work ethic are beyond reproach. That's my friend.
I paid him to do that. No, I was kidding.
So
Richard, I have great respect for Jude, and he's one of my favorite people ever to use as a witness in court.
Great. So you got you each other. So Richard, I legally entered the USA April 10th. I don't know what year that is. Biden announced for TPS April 14th. Then May 7th, I left the US to Europe for my job and planning to return into the US June 14th. My job makes me to always travel. So I'm sure his question is, would he qualify for TPS?
Right. So, I mean, the question is, what is his status now? That's really the question. And what is his prospect for getting a green card? Because I know a Richard Nadino who's a client, but it may not be the same Richard Nadino. It's not an uncommon name. So what I would say is it depends on if you need TPS or not, and if you have a green card or not. If you have a green card, so the one set of people that I feel probably don't need to apply for TPS are people who already have a green card or who are citizens. But if you don't have a green card and you're not a citizen, it's definitely a plus. It's not a negative in any way.
Okay, so Richard, I think again you need to clarify legally entered. What status do you have? Okay, and are you hoping to apply for a green card? Are you a green card holder hoping to apply for citizenship and all that? And says,
I mean, the fact that he's traveling for his job suggests that he has advanced parole. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to travel. So I don't think he's probably on a visitor's visa. I'm assuming that basically you're married to a U.S. citizen. But, you know, I guess the question depends on how many problems do you have, or is there been problems that you haven't gotten the green card through the citizenship? And by the way, one of the easiest ways to get a green card is through, and I should do a presentation on that, Lambert, is through a marriage. One of the hardest ways to get a green card is through marriage, because there are a lot of factors that can absolutely bar you. So, and I deal with a lot of those. So marriage cases are not a given that means you're getting a green card.
So Richard says he's on a visitor visa. I think, so again, based on his work, I'm sure, I don't know whether it's prudent to apply for TPS in this case.
Well, I don't see if he's on a visitor's visa how he can travel back and forth. That's unless he's claiming that he's just visiting the U.S., in which case he doesn't have the residency and he also doesn't have the physical presence by June 7. So I think, Richard, you might have a problem, but I'd have to look at the specific facts.
Okay, Richard. So again, I'm going to put on this Danielle's office number. You can call the office for that. DJ Hans, thank you, Miss Beach. Question: If you entered
E, denied asylum and currently waiting for BI to make a decision on your case, and this we covered, and the answer is absolutely yes, and definitely yes, you should.
Should, correct. So Richard has come back. My wife's case is still pending asylum, and I use visitor B2 visa to come in and out. So
then he's not a resident.
So again, people have to look at those two things about citizenship. I think most people they can prove that they are citizens. I know one of the problems is for people who don't have passports. Those who came in, they were paroled because
right.
Yeah. So
right.
How that is going to work, what do they need to start thinking about, and all that is important.
And that's another problem, because if you apply for a passport and you're an asylum applicant, and you apply through a passport here in the U.S., you're doing two things. One, you're saying the government isn't really persecuting me because they're giving me a passport. And two, you're saying that you now have a document that immigration could use to send you back. So.
Yeah, so again, I wanted us to clarify a couple of other things, Danielle. So there are people who are currently on deportation. They have been on deportation for years. They have just gone.
All those should apply for TPS. 100%. 100%. I mean, if they don't, it's foolish, because that window will close and then they won't be able to.
But the problem there is now you are applying and you are now telling the government where you are, and they can come.
Exactly. So that's what a lot of people are saying to me. But they don't know I'm here, and so maybe I don't want to apply. Usually that's not Cameroonians. Usually that's Central Americans who will say, but they don't know I'm here. I've been here 20 years. They don't know. I don't now want to tell them I'm here, and they have a tracking. And look, the government is very smart, but they aren't that organized. So the fact that you applied for TPS, are they then going to come and look for you once TPS is finished to come and deport you? No. So I don't think there's, I don't think there's a downside. It's like the same thing happened, by the way, when they declared DACA. People said, oh, no one's going to apply for DACA because all these people are in hiding. They're all illegal. They all came in illegally. They're not going to apply for DACA. And what happened? Everybody applied for DACA. So same thing.
So that is important. And again, for those who are just joining, if you are in any form, I mean, let's classify that or clarify that again. People who have applied for asylum, depending on the category, you can go in and apply for TPS. It doesn't hurt, but you need to check in with your attorney, isn't it?
And if I'm not your attorney, you can still do a consult and check in with me.
Correct.
And the answer to that question is probably not. Can I travel outside the U.S. with TPS? I mean, there may be certain situations where you may be able to, but again, it depends on what is your other status. If it's asylum or, we talked at length about that, how you self-deport. And so I think, if you didn't hear all this conversation, I think Lambert's going to put it on a YouTube or something that you can listen to it. Because I think if you miss parts of the presentation, you're going to have a lot of questions. So it's maybe important for you to go back and listen to the whole presentation, and that will answer, hopefully, most of your questions.
Yes, Danielle, there's something I wanted you to clarify again, because surprisingly, there is a second ruling or regulation that applies to those who are on F1. That's those with student visas.
Well, so people with student visas who apply for asylum, if they have valid F1 status, technically they can certainly travel on that student visa.
I'm talking about the TPS. There's a second ruling that DHS put out in relation to students on F1 visas who are applying for TPS from Cameroon. I was wondering why that was the case, why they needed to make a second category just for those on F1. I did not read the entire thing, but it's something to look up. And there's a question that Shelley is asking here. Can your 1,500 retainer be paid instrumentally?
Usually not, because we need to get these out quickly. We're not going to take months to get these out. I'm looking at the main regulation thing, and I do not see anything in the big report that came out that says anything about students. So I'm not familiar with a separate ruling on the students. And it could be that I just, overlooked that, but it's certainly not in the main report about TPS at all. Because I read that through before we doing this presentation, and it is, I don't see anything about about students.
Yeah, I'll look that up again, and I'll be able to. And I wanted to also say, Milon Jacob says, thank you, Miss Beach, for your time. And lots of this. So again, this was just to give people a quick update what to do, and it's kind of a very tricky situation with the TPS. People are excited about it, but people have to be careful. I mean, careful in terms of applying for it, what to do, and how to apply for it. So I advise people, get to your lawyers.
Another situation that people that we didn't mention is, people have been here since 1980s, and maybe they never applied for anything, and they have work authority and they have a social security card, and then they come to me and they say, well, now if I apply for TPS, that's going to bring me to the attention, and I don't want my boss to know that I've been working without a work permit all this time, because they've never questioned me because I had a social security card. So in that kind of situation, which is kind of unique because not that many people have been here, but I would say you can still apply for TPS, just don't give your employer that TPS work permit. But what I explained to this lady was, I said, what if you lose your job or E-Verify throws you out? At least then you can apply for a different job because you have that work permit,
Right. So that is again important. I'll say again, Danielle, what's the office number so that I can put up for people to?
It's 202-331-3074. But the best way to reach me is probably by email. So you can send me an email, but in the subject line, put, your name and your phone number, and put, I heard or TPS of Lambert's. And so I know where you're coming from, and, and if there's something urgent, put that in the text of your email. Because sometimes people ask me questions and I don't answer them because I don't understand the question. So I'm not a random answer of questions. Usually I only answer questions for my clients. I have over 4,000 clients, so I don't really have time to, answer a lot of people's questions unless you're a client. If you're a client, then yes, you get that service automatically. Being a TPS client does make you a client. So it's a great benefit to you because you can use my expertise of 30 years. And by the way, I don't just do asylum. I do every area of immigration. So, I bring a holistic approach to this of knowledge of many different areas of immigration, not just asylum.
What's the email address, Danielle?
dbeach at beach-oswald.com. I would write it on your chat, but I don't see a chat thing to write it on.
Yes, I'm putting it on. So.
Oh, okay.
So again, this has been great. Danielle, you and I, we promise that we'll be doing this regularly. Let's get back. I think there have been too many changes in asylum issues over the last months. And
yeah,
I think
there's lots of other cases we could talk about, but I know your program, you deal with a lot of different issues that are very important to people. So
yeah, so I
thank
really
you for
want
inviting me, and I'm happy to, talk to you all. And I hope that this has been something that you've learned something from and benefited. And please listen to his YouTube, if the whole thing, because, it's going to be beneficial to you so you don't, keep asking the same questions. Thank you.
Again, thank you very much, Danielle. And if you have questions, if you cannot reach Danielle, you can always reach me. I can connect you to Danielle. Thank you for your time. This is a community service. The one thing that I know about TPS is we need to come together as a community to be able to do things so that, again, there are many things that we can do together. I know, for example, that DHS is always looking for communities to do education about some of these things, but we are so separated, so far away, we are not united in a way. Let's try to build this up. But as I say, immigration is going to be one of the things I'm talking on every week. I'm going to be talking about immigration. I'm going to be knocking on Danielle's doors. You have Danielle's office number there, 202-331-3074. And you have our email, dbeach@beachoswald.com. Am I right?
The other thing I would suggest is that you go to our website. Hasn't been updated, so you won't see all the lawyers on it. But we have a newsletter that comes out every month.
Okay.
If you subscribe to that newsletter, it tells you all the most recent news and information that has come out. And it also gives you some examples of some of the cases that we get granted. Obviously we have to have permission to put the clients in there if we do. And if they don't give us permission, then we're not going to put their story in there. But it'll give you all the new news. And we post blogs like 2 to 3 times a week. So that gives you also, so this is a free service. You sign up, and I mean, honestly, where are you going to get such great information? So, because you hear stuff on the news, but the stuff on the news isn't always correct. A lot of times it's wrong. Correct. So I would do that too if I were you. Sign up for the website so you get the newsletter. One just came out at the end of May. So another one will come out at the end of June. So we have one every month.
Right. So I'm going to, again, like I said, I'm going to be trying to get in contact with you so that we can do, even if it's just a monthly, just what is happening, what people do, because I know there are too many people on the list. I was shocked to find out that the government is estimating that there are 11,400 Cameroonians who could benefit from TPS, if I'm not mistaken. I know the original figures that people were talking about was 40,000. But in the communique, the government says there are 11,400 people. I hope that's the number. But again, here is my number, 240-988-3212, and my email, lambert.bom@gmail. If you need any advice on this, you can always also go to the expert directly. That's Danielle's phone number, and that's her email. Danielle, any last word?
No, I just wanted to thank you for inviting me. And yeah, I mean, what they said about, I saw a number like that too. I don't believe it. It does say that USCIS estimates 11,700 individuals being eligible for TPS. That just means that they have records somewhere that maybe some of those people have died, or they're citizens of people who are here from Cameroon who could be eligible for TPS. I don't think that that's a number that's very significant, because some of those people may be citizens, not needed or whatever. But yes, that's what they did say.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Again, get a lawyer. Don't go into any legal issues without contacting a lawyer. And you have one here with 30 years of experience. That's a badge of honor there that you can put it anywhere and use it, and you are guaranteed. So thank you again. It's been a great evening.
Thank you. And I hope that, it's been, as I said, a great opportunity for people to learn about something new. The great thing about Lambert's programs is they're always timely. He always picks topics that he contacted me 2 days ago. I was like, this just came out. I haven't even read the regulation yet. So,
right.
So that's the good thing, is you have very timely topics. So that's good.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Again, thank you all. And again, like I said, every week we'll be out with one issue. Thanks, and see you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.